Hi there, welcome to this video. So I'm going to talk you through, first of all, the overview of the nervous system. So the nervous system is split into two. So if we draw our person, draw an amazing gingerbread man, the two nervous system kind of labels that we've got are the brain and the spinal cord, first of all. So we call those the CNS, which stands for the central nervous system. Okay, and then coming out of that, we've got like pairs of neurons. So one goes into the nervous system, one comes out, in, out, and they go to the periphery of your body. So the word periphery means like around the outside. So these ones here, nerve in, nerve out, nerve in, nerve out, they're called the PNS. So the P stands for the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so first of all, make sure you know these two labels, the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. All right, two labels that you need to be able to identify. So the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. And within the spinal cord, we have got some neurons called relay neurons, which we'll come on to in a minute. So they form part of that. And the peripheral nervous systems, those pairs of neurons that are going in and out, the ones that go from the periphery to the central nervous system are called sensory neurons. And the ones that go back in, back out again, the ones that are going away from the central nervous system are called motor neurons. All right, so make sure you can label those as well. Now at GCSE, you will have done the reflex arc. So the reflex arc is a way of remembering how those different neurons fit together. So if we've got our person again, and usually we use the example of touching something hot, although it could be any kind of stimulus really. Oops, not gone red. Okay, so there's our hot flame. So that would be called a stimulus. So that's step number one, that there's some kind of stimulus. Now in your skin, you have receptors. So in the skin, in the hand here, you've got a receptor. So number two is a receptor. So a receptor detects a change in the environment. So that could be skin, detecting touch. It could equally be in your nose for smell, eyes for sight, ears for sound, tongue for taste, etc. So you've got a receptor. Okay, then if we draw in our nervous system, so here's our central nervous system, our brain and our spinal cord. So going from the receptor to your spinal cord, you've got your sensory neuron. Now, a sensory neuron is a neuron that has the cell body halfway up. So it will have some little branches here. It will go along, then it will have the cell body, and then it will continue, and it will go into your spinal cord. So this number 3 here is your sensory neuron. I'll draw it bigger in a minute. All right, your sensory neuron, and it goes between the receptor and the spinal cord here. Fourth one is a neuron that's in your spinal cord, and this neuron doesn't have a long, thin part to it. It's just more like this. And that's number 4, and that's called the relay neuron, and that's in your spinal cord. Then the signal gets passed to another neuron. So the next one is going to go from your spinal cord, and this one starts with the cell body here, and it goes out. That's number 5, and that's called the motor neuron. Now, a motor neuron connects your spinal cord to sorry, undo that. Oops, wrong button. Where's my undo? There. Oops. What's happening? All right. Just ignore that arrow. It doesn't want me to rub it out. Connects your spinal cord to what we call the effector. So the effector, I'll change the colour. The effector in this case is a muscle, but an effector can be, number 6, an effector can be a muscle or a gland. That's what I wanted that arrow for. Let's draw it here. So it can be either a muscle or a gland. And then the effector causes number 7, which is your response, which in this case is to lift your arm up out of the way of the fire. Okay, so you need to make sure you know those 7 steps of the reflex arc off by heart: stimulus, receptor, then your 3 neurons in order, sensory, relay, and motor neurons, then the effector, which is a muscle or a gland, and that causes a response. So make sure you know that reflex arc. Okay, now let's have a look at those neurons in detail. So the first neuron is called a sensory neuron. And the sensory neuron is really kind of obvious to identify, because the cell body, the bit where the nucleus is not at the end. So we go along, then we've got this little cell body bit, which is where the nucleus is, and then it continues on a bit. All right, so wherever the nucleus is, the little bit around that is called the cell body. And in the sensory neuron, the way to recognize it is that the cell body is not in the middle of the neuron. Okay, so it's it's not at the end, it's in the middle, not at the end. Okay, it's in the middle somewhere. Now, when we're labeling a neuron, it's really important to know which way the signal is going. So in this one, if the signal is going this way, any section that is before the cell body, so all of this section here is before the cell body, that's going to be called the dendron, okay, before cell body. And then when the signal gets past the cell body and goes back into this little line here, it's then called the axon. So there it's the axon, but there it's the dendron, okay. Now, a sensory neuron takes the signal from here, which is going to be the receptors, all right, which is at some kind of sense organ. So it could be on your skin or your eye or your ear, etc. Okay, and at this end, it's going to deliver the signal to the next neuron. So it then sends the signal on to the next neuron, which is called the relay neuron. And the way that one neuron connects to another one is at synapses. So at this end here, we're going to have what we call synaptic knobs. And if you watch the video on synapses, then you'll find out what synaptic knobs are. Okay, but because that end connects to another neuron, it'll have synaptic knobs at that end. The other thing that you might have drawn on your neuron is some cells wrapped around the dendron and the axon all the way along here. And those cells are called, or they make up what we call the myelin sheath. So if it's got those, we say the neuron is myelinated, okay? And that helps the signal to go faster. So the next type of neuron we've got is called a relay neuron. And the labels are the same. It's still a type of neuron, but it's slightly different in that it's not a long, thin neuron. The relay neuron basically only has a cell body. Okay, so all of this bit is the cell body, because this is where the nucleus is. But again, it's really important that we know which way the impulse is going. So let's say, for example, that the impulse is going in here, through the cell body, out here. Okay, this side of the relay neuron is going to come from the sensory neuron. Okay, so it's going to connect to the sensory neuron on this side. And on the other side, it's going to connect onto a motor neuron. So at both sides, it's connecting to another neuron. So at the ends of these, in all areas on both sides, it's going to have these synaptic knobs. Okay. Now, actually, sorry, I should say synaptic knobs this side where it's passing it on. This side, we shouldn't call it that. We call that the postsynaptic membrane. It would be. Watch the synapses video and it'll be more obvious. Synaptic membrane, but it will still be at synapse. Synaptic membrane, just there. Okay. You could label these tiny bits here that are when the signal's coming in before it gets to the cell body. You can still label them dendrons or dendrites, den something. And when it comes out, you could label that as tiny little axons. All right, before cell body dendrons, after cell body axons. But the relay neuron is connecting. It's in the middle of the three types of neuron. Then the third type we're going to have is going to be the motor neuron. And the motor neuron is kind of the classic one where you've got the cell body at one end. So you've got cell body, nice long axon, and then it divides here. So in the middle there, we've got our nucleus. The area around that is going to be the cell body. Now, if the signal is going to go this way along, before the cell body is going to be dendrons. If it branches into tiny little bits, you might call the tiny branches dendrites, but den something before the cell body. So that might be dendrites for the tiny little branches, and then the bigger bits, the dendron coming in. Okay, like there, probably more, where it's like a single bit coming in. All right, then you've got the nucleus with the cell body, and then coming out here, then you've got the axon. Okay, these ones are likely to be myelinated again. So you've got the myelin sheath to make the signal go faster. Okay, now where's this fit into the big picture? So it's going to come from the relay neuron and it's going to go to the effector. And the effector, remember, can be a muscle or a gland. Okay, and that's going to send the signal from the central nervous system to the effector. So the way they're going to fit together is you're going to go from sensory to relay to motor. All right, so sensory, first of all, remember cell body's in the middle. Then the relay is going to connect like that. And then the motor something like that. And that's going to go to the muscle or gland, which is the effector. Muscle or gland. And this is going to come from the receptors, which is at your sense organs, just here. Okay, and remember that the relay is in the central nervous system. The relay is in the spinal cord, and these are the pairs that are going in and out. Normally, you'd have sensory coming in and relay going out on the same side. I've just drawn them go across the page in that case. Okay. Now, there are a few other words that we can associate with the nervous system. So some of the things that are controlled by nerves, we can control, and some things we can't control. So we say that they're either voluntary or involuntary. Now, the part of your nervous system, it doesn't like to undo, does it? Let's see. Is there a rubber? Maybe that one. There we go. So the voluntary one can sometimes be called the somatic system, and the involuntary is called the autonomic. It sounds like automatic, doesn't it? But it's autonomic system. It just happens like your heart rate, for example. Nerves can go to your heart to make your heart go faster or to go slower. But your heart does just beat on its own. You do just breathe without thinking. You do send signals to your digestive system without thinking. So involuntary system is autonomic, and voluntary can be somatic. Now, most of your nervous system is made of neurons, and we've talked about the 3 types of neurons. There are a few other cells in your nervous system which are called glial cells. Now, glial cells are basically just like support cells for the neuron. They're not actually made of neurons. They're just sort of part of your nervous system that support them, and they actually digest dead neurons or manufacture the components of new neurons. So just making sure that all the neurons are kind of fresh and working, if you like. All right, that's all I'm going to do in this video, and then I'll do action potentials and resting potentials in a separate one.